I wasn't even looking for a job when I stumbled across the ad. It was early October, and Siloam Springs had started to wear its autumn coat. Rust-colored leaves clung to the trees like forgotten memories, and the wind was colder than it should have been. I had come back to town after 2 years of bouncing between cities, trying to get my life together after Dad passed. Somehow, I ended up back in the place I'd promised myself I'd never return to. It wasn't nostalgia that brought me back. It was necessity. I was broke, between gigs, and my cousin Aaron let me crash in his basement for a while. One rainy morning, after another night of tossing and turning, I found myself wandering the streets. My hands were buried in my hoodie, and the cold was sharp enough to cut through denim. That's when I saw the sign. It was taped to the inside of a dusty window. Help wanted. Inquire within. The store looked abandoned. The kind of old RadioShack that should have died when the rest of them did. Faded posters hung inside the windows, showcasing flip phones and cassette players like relics in a museum. The glass was cloudy, and I could barely make out the rows of shelves beyond it. Still, something made me pull the door. To my surprise, it opened with a soft chime, as if someone had been expecting me. The inside was dim, lit only by fluorescent tubes that flickered like they were gasping for life. Dust hung in the air, and the scent of old cardboard and static filled my nostrils. The shelves were filled with tech no one had touched in a decade, VCR parts, circuit boards, and walkie-talkies. I called out, unsure why. Maybe I expected a ghost to answer. Instead, a man stepped out from behind the counter. He looked like someone straight out of the 1980s, slick back hair, thick glasses, and a tucked-in RadioShack polo shirt that looked freshly ironed. He smiled like he had been waiting for this moment his whole life. "You're here for the job," he said. Not asked, stated. I hesitated. Yeah, I guess. I saw the sign outside." "Good," he nodded. "We've been waiting. You're hired." No interview, no questions, no form to fill. He extended a cold, bony hand. I shook it against my better judgment. His name tag read Mr. Delroy. "You'll work the night shift, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. You'll start tonight." There was no room for negotiation. Before I could respond, he walked to a drawer behind the counter, retrieved a worn RadioShack badge, and clipped it to my shirt. My name was already printed on it. "How did you—" "Rule 1, he interrupted, suddenly serious. "Never question how we know things. Just follow the rules." I chuckled nervously, thinking he was joking, but his eyes didn't flinch. He handed me a folded paper. "Read this before your shift. Memorize it." I took it, unsure of what else to do, and left the store with the chime ringing behind me. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavier now, thicker somehow, as if I had stepped into a different version of the town I knew. Back at Aaron's place, I opened the paper. It was a list, typed neatly with small, uniform font. RadioShack, Siloam Springs night shift rules. 1. Arrive exactly at 8:59 p.m. Do not enter a minute earlier or later. 2. Greet the store by saying, "I am here to listen." 3. Do not answer the phone. If it rings, unplug it. 4. Do not speak to the man in the green hoodie. He is not a customer. 5. The third aisle disappears at 3:33 a.m. Do not enter it after that time. 6. If you hear static from the speaker system, hum loudly until it stops. 7. At 4:44 a.m., the power will cut. Remain still. Do not move. 8. Clock out before 5 a.m. If you do not, you will remain. I read it again. What the hell was this? Was it a prank? A weird store tradition? I'd worked overnight shifts before, but this was different. Still, something in me wouldn't let it go. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something else. Something whispering from deep within that store's dusty shelves, calling me back. I showed up at 8:59 p.m. sharp. Not a second earlier. The door opened with that same chime. This time the store looked different, cleaner. The shelves were fuller, the lights brighter. Mr. Delroy wasn't there. In his place was a small black notebook on the counter with a pen and a post-it that read, "Clock in." I signed my name. Then I whispered, "I am here to listen." Nothing happened. For a while, it was normal. I walked the aisles. I straightened boxes. I watched the old security monitors in the back room, though the static fuzzed over them every few minutes. Around midnight, the phone rang. A shrill, high-pitched sound that didn't fit the store. It echoed through the aisles like a scream. I remembered the rule and sprinted to the front counter. My hands shook as I reached for the cord and yanked it from the wall. The ringing stopped instantly. My heart was still pounding when I turned. Someone was standing by the batteries aisle. He wore a green hoodie. His back was to me, head tilted as if listening to something. My voice caught in my throat. Rule 4 repeated in my head like a mantra: do not speak to the man in the green hoodie. I forced myself to turn away, pretending I hadn't seen him. I walked to the opposite end of the store, hiding behind a shelf of dusty routers. My breath came in shallow gasps. A few minutes later, when I peeked again, he was gone. I thought about leaving, thought about ripping off my name badge and running, but my legs wouldn't move. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I glanced at the clock. I remembered Rule 5. I turned toward the third aisle, and it wasn't there. It had been between the toy electronics and the printer cables. Now it was just a blank stretch of wall. The shelves on either side didn't meet. There was a 3-foot gap, like something had been surgically removed from space itself. My vision blurred, and I blinked rapidly. When I looked again, the aisle was back. That's when I heard it. Static. The intercom crackled to life with the high-pitched hum of dead air. I slapped my hands over my ears, the noise seeping into my skull like water into a sponge. I stumbled toward the back room, humming a broken tune. Anything block it out. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, off key and panicked. The static faded as suddenly as it had started. By 4:44 a.m., I was sitting behind the counter, staring at the wall clock. Sweat trickled down my spine. Then, right on cue, the lights died. The hum of the fluorescent bulbs disappeared. The hum of the world disappeared. I did not move. I don't know how long I stayed frozen. The darkness felt alive, like it was watching me, testing me, measuring how much I had learned. When the lights returned, the clock read 4:57 a.m. I stood slowly, walked to the black notebook, and signed out. At 5 a.m., I walked out of the store. The sun was beginning to rise. The air was cold, but it felt normal again. I made it back to Aaron's place, collapsed onto the couch, and stared at the ceiling. What had I gotten myself into? All I knew was this: I'd be back tomorrow night. I had no choice. Something in that store had pulled me in, and it wasn't done with me yet. The second night felt heavier, not just emotionally, but physically, like the air itself pressed down harder than it should. My limbs moved slower. My thoughts came in foggy waves. I hadn't told Aaron anything. What could I even say? Hey man, I think I'm working at a haunted RadioShack where the third aisle disappears and hooded ghosts show up around midnight. He would have laughed, then told me I needed to get back on my meds. So I kept my mouth shut. At exactly 8:59 p.m., I stepped through the glass door again. Chime. The store greeted me with that eerie, static hum beneath the silence, like white noise that never quite left your ears. The lights buzzed, casting long shadows behind every shelf. As before, Mr. Delroy was nowhere to be seen. The little black notebook waited for me at the counter. I signed in. I am here to listen, I whispered. This time, I felt something, like a breath on the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. Just the rows of outdated tech blinking their plastic eyes in the low light. I began my shift like before, wandering the aisles, wiping non-existent dust from unopened Bluetooth headsets and calculator boxes. But tonight, there was a sound. It started around 10:15 p.m. A soft beep, beep, beep coming from aisle 4. Not the usual security alarm tone. This was slower, deeper, like a monitor you'd hear in a hospital room. I followed the sound and found it was coming from an old toy radio sitting on the shelf. One of those cheap, brightly colored sets meant for kids. The battery compartment had been duct taped shut, but the green LED on its face was blinking. Beep. I reached toward it, and the lights above me flickered violently. Every aisle behind me suddenly felt wrong. I could feel the weight of the shelves pressing in, so I backed off. I didn't touch it. Instead, I walked away, pretending I hadn't seen anything. At 11:40 p.m., the phone rang again. Only this time, it wasn't just a ring. It was a voice, a whisper, layered beneath the sound. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel them. Cold and foreign, like something trying to crawl inside my thoughts. I grabbed the cord and yanked it. Silence. My heart was hammering. I leaned against the counter, trying to breathe. Then I noticed something strange. A customer was in the store. A woman. She stood near the television wall, her back to me, hands clasped behind her. She wore a yellow dress with a long white coat over it, too clean, too bright for this place. I hadn't heard the door chime. She was still. I didn't want to approach her, but something about the way her head was tilted made it impossible to look away. I called out, my voice cracking, "Ma'am, store's closed." She didn't turn, didn't flinch. I repeated it, louder this time. Still nothing. I took one step toward her, then another. The TVs on the wall behind her were all showing static now, except one. That one had a feed of the store itself, the security camera. Except it wasn't the current moment. It showed me, standing behind the counter, asleep. I was slumped over in the footage, head down, as if passed out. But I was here, fully awake, walking toward the woman. The footage on that one screen began to distort, the image flickering in and out like a VHS on its last breath. And that's when she turned, but not naturally. Her body stayed perfectly still. Only her head moved, rotating further than it should. Her eyes were hollow. Her lips pulled into a stretched grin that had no warmth. She whispered, in a voice like cassette tape dragging on rewind, "You're not supposed to see me yet." The lights blinked, and she vanished. Every TV shut off at once, and the temperature dropped. I could see my breath clouding in front of my mouth. I stood frozen in the middle of aisle 4, where the toy radio now lay on the floor, still beeping. I backed away. That's when the static returned. This time from the speaker system in the ceiling. It wasn't just white noise anymore. It was a scream buried underneath, like someone trapped inside it, shrieking to get out. I slammed my hands over my ears and started humming again. This time louder, furiously. Twinkle, twinkle, little. A loud crash echoed from the back of the store. I jumped. The lights trembled. My badge vibrated on my chest like it was reacting to something. I rushed toward the sound. One of the back room doors had burst open. The inventory room. Except it wasn't the same inventory room I'd seen yesterday. It was deeper. Much deeper. The shelves were longer, stretching out far past what the building should have allowed. The far wall wasn't even visible. The fluorescent lights only illuminated the first few feet, then melted into shadows. Boxes lined both sides, stacked higher than I could reach. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped further. My breath came out in puffs. I could hear something scuttling between the boxes. Soft clicks, like nails tapping against plastic. I didn't want to be in here, but I also knew I had to check one thing. The time. I glanced at my watch. 3:32 a.m. I ran out of the room and into the front store. I stared down aisle 3. It was still there. I waited. Exactly 1 minute later, I blinked, and it was gone again. Like someone had taken a bite out of reality, a perfect gap. I turned my head quickly, and for just a split second I saw her again, the woman in the yellow dress, her smile wider than before. She was standing inside the missing aisle space, and she mouthed something to me. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't need to. I could feel it in my bones. "Don't stay after 5. I stumbled back to the front. I stayed there behind the counter, gripping the surface so hard my knuckles turned white. The static faded. But at 4:44 a.m., the lights went out, just like last time, except this time, there were footsteps. Not mine. They circled slowly around the shelves, boots scraping against tile. Closer, closer. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. A few feet away, something whispered, "You're listening now." Then silence. When the light snapped back, the clock read 4:57 a.m. I practically threw the notebook open and signed out. I ran through the door the second the minute hand struck 5. The early morning sun never looked so strange, so unnatural. I didn't sleep when I got home. I just sat on the floor of the basement, staring at my hands. They were shaking. My badge was still clipped to my chest. I knew I couldn't quit. And I knew something else too. RadioShack wasn't a store. It was a gate. And it had opened a little wider tonight. I didn't go home after the 3rd shift because I never left. At least, not really. Let me explain. It started like the other nights. I arrived at 8:59 p.m., the cold bit harder than before. The wind in Siloam Springs carried a strange scent, like briars and metal soaked in water. The street outside the RadioShack was empty, as always. No cars, no people, no signs of life. Just my breath in the air and the faint glow of the open sign that always seemed to flicker to life just as I approached. The chime above the door sounded hollow, like a sound memory, not the real thing. I signed the logbook. "I am here to listen," I whispered. This time I didn't feel alone. Even before the rules began unfolding their nightly horrors, Something was already different. The store had changed again. The ceiling was higher than I remembered, the aisles longer, the fluorescent lights dimmer, as though they were being drained instead of powered. And then my badge vibrated. I hadn't even taken 2 steps into the store. A note had been tucked under the counter beside the logbook. It wasn't there the night before. Plain, yellowed paper with something typed in the same blocky font as the rule sheet. New rule. If you hear your own voice calling from the back room, do not answer. It is not you, and it wants to come out. I swallowed hard. I hadn't even heard anything yet, and already something inside me screamed to leave. But I couldn't. I needed answers, and part of me, God help me, wanted to know why the rules existed. By 10:30 p.m., I was rearranging a row of digital clocks that hadn't sold since 2007 when I heard it. The phone didn't ring. The intercom didn't crackle. It was my own voice, calling from the back storage room. Hey, can you help me back here? It was perfect. My tone, my cadence, even the way I said back here, drawn out just the way I spoke when I was annoyed. But I hadn't spoken. I froze. The lights flickered in rhythm with the voice. Come on, I'm stuck. The shelves fell. I backed away from the aisle. Every instinct told me to move toward it. The voice had urgency. It sounded scared. But I knew better. Rule 7 was burned into my head from the first night. Do not move during the blackout. And now, this new one, don't answer your own voice. I turned my head toward the security monitors near the register. The one that usually showed looping camera footage was filled with static. But in the middle of the screen, there I was, standing alone in the back room. Except I wasn't moving. I was smiling. Not in a friendly way. Not in my way. It was a stretched, painful smile, lips curled back like the woman in the yellow dress. The screen flickered again, and this other me moved his hand, waving at the camera. And then he reached behind the camera. The screen turned black. I stepped away from the monitor, heart pounding. The store felt like it was watching me now. Every aisle, every device, every blinking light was an eye, and I was in its sight. That's when the radios lit up. All of them. From toy walkie-talkies to ancient police scanners. Their tiny red and green LEDs blinked in unison. Static bled out of each one, but beneath it, whispers. 100 voices, muttering, sobbing, breathing. One voice rose above the rest. A child. Don't let him out! Don't let him out! Don't let him out! It repeated over and over, like a broken record spinning in reverse. The lights overhead dimmed to nearly nothing. The store glowed in red and green LED light like a sickly Christmas horror show. I tried to shut the radios off. None responded. Then something new happened. The lights surged, and a low hum replaced the static. Everything stopped. A screen in the far back, an old analog TV, turned on without warning. No plug, no cable, just on. It showed footage of me. But not in the store. I was standing in a graveyard, shovel in hand, breathing hard, dirt on my face. I dropped the flashlight. That wasn't a memory. I've never done that. But it looked real. Too real. Then the screen glitched, and now I was inside the RadioShack again, sitting in the break room, bleeding from the forehead, muttering something. I leaned closer to listen. On screen me whispered, I let it out. The screen shattered. The sound tore through the store like a scream from inside the walls. All the radios lit up again. The phone, though unplugged, rang with a violent shrill. I covered my ears and fell behind the counter. When the lights returned, it was 3:33 a.m. I didn't even check aisle 3 this time. I knew it was gone. I felt it. The absence was like a wound in the air. At 4:02 a.m., I finally got brave enough to peek into the back room. Nothing. No shadow clone, no other me. Just rows of boxes. But when I turned back, the store behind me had changed. The layout was reversed. The aisles swapped positions. The door I came through was now bricked shut. I ran to the front, hyperventilating. I didn't even have a notebook to sign out. The counter was empty except for a clock. 4:43 a.m. I froze. It was almost blackout time, but something made me look again. The second hand wasn't moving. I tapped the glass. Nothing. Suddenly, a voice whispered behind me, closer than it should have been. You're doing so well, let's make this harder. The lights died. I didn't breathe, didn't twitch. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. From the darkness, a soft dragging sound, like something wet and heavy crawling between aisles. It stopped inches from me. I could feel its presence. It smelled like rust and dirt and burnt plastic. Something brushed my ankle. I screamed, but I didn't move. I wanted to. God, I wanted to run. But my body obeyed the rule even when my mind shattered. After what felt like an hour, the light snapped on. It was gone. The clock now read 4:59 a.m. No notebook, no log, no Mr. Delroy. But the front door was there again. Right, I burst through it, feeling the world shift around me. It was dawn. I was outside. I didn't know how or why, but the store had let me out. This time, I didn't run straight home. I turned around, and for the first time, the Radio Shack was dark. No lights, no open sign, just silence. Except as I stood there staring at the empty windows, something whispered from inside. You left a piece of yourself in here. And for some reason, I believed it. By the fourth night, I had stopped trying to convince myself I was sane. Something in that store was changing me. Or maybe it wasn't changing me. Maybe it was simply uncovering what had been buried deep inside all along. I spent most of that day staring into nothing, my ears still ringing from the static, my hands trembling. Aaron asked if I was okay. I lied, said I just hadn't been sleeping. He offered me coffee. I said I was fine, but the truth was nothing in me felt fine anymore, and yet I returned. At 8:59 p.m., I walked back into that cursed store. Chime. The sound was duller tonight. Like it too, was tired of this routine. The logbook was gone again. No notebook, no pen, just an old, dusty radio resting on the counter like it had been waiting for me. I stared at it, half expecting it to switch on by itself. It didn't. I whispered the words again. I am here to listen. The lights dimmed slightly. That was the new normal. I walked the aisle slowly, feeling every corner like a blind man navigating a cathedral. The air was dense, and the smell of burnt copper lingered. I checked my watch every 10 minutes, obsessed with time now, because in this place, time wasn't just a measurement, it was a trap. At 10:07 p.m., I passed aisle 5, and something new caught my eye. A display table that hadn't been there before. Atop it sat an old shortwave radio, the kind with a metal dial and analog tuner. Its speakers were scarred with dust, but the light behind the tuning display glowed with a soft, pulsing green. A sticky note was stuck to the table. Do not tune the dial. I backed away. I had learned by now that the rules, written or not, were not suggestions. Still, the longer I stood there, the more I felt it. The pull. Like it wasn't just a radio. It was a mouth, and it was already open. At 10:38 p.m., I heard voices. Not the intercom, not the phone, from within the radio. They weren't whispers this time. They were chanting. Not English, not anything I could place. But the rhythm made my skin crawl. I covered the display with a cloth from a nearby shelf. It continued chanting. Then a second voice joined in. My own, coming from the speakers. Help me, I'm still inside. I never left. I yanked the cloth off. The radio switched off. Not a sound, not a whisper. It was like it had never spoken at all. I stumbled backward and knocked over a rack of old USB cables. They tangled around my feet, and I kicked them away, half sobbing as I tried to regain my footing. That's when I saw her again. The woman in the yellow dress. She was in aisle 2 this time, sitting on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. Her face was blank. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked tired. Her eyes flicked up and met mine. And this time she spoke aloud. They're not rules, she said. They're cages. Then she blinked out of existence, leaving nothing behind but the faint smell of perfume. The silence returned, but it didn't last long. At 11:51 p.m., the power surged, not the usual blackout. The opposite. Every light in the store flared white-hot. Every screen turned on. The televisions played static. The radios buzzed with electric moans. And every clock flashed the same time. That's not even a real time. But there it was on everything with the display. My watch vibrated. I looked down and saw that it wasn't my reflection in the watch face. It was him again, the other me. Smiling, I threw the watch across the store and it shattered against a shelving unit. But the moment I looked back, he was standing behind the counter. Not on a screen, not in a reflection, in flesh, wearing my clothes. My expression, my name badge. He tilted his head. Why do you keep leaving me in here? I couldn't speak. He took a step forward. They like you better, but I was first. I was always first. His face began to split, not with blood or gore, but with white light cracking down the middle like a shattered screen. Inside his face was static, and that static screamed. I ran. The aisle stretched again. The lights flickered violently. No matter where I turned, I ended up back at the table with the forbidden radio. The sticky note was gone. Now a single word was written in permanent marker on its face. Tune! I screamed at it. What do you want? And the dial turned by itself. A low hum erupted from the speaker. Then, if you're listening, you're already part of us. The walls of the store pulsed. Reality bent. I saw memories I didn't recognize flashing across the TV screens. Me as a child in a house I'd never lived in, crying over a grave I never visited. The smell of fire, the sound of wind chimes, then blackness. When I opened my eyes, it was 4:44 a.m., and I was standing in aisle 3, except aisle 3 shouldn't have existed at that time. I realized that too late, because something was watching me from the empty gap where it should have disappeared. Not a ghost, not a person, a mass of wires, teeth, radios fused into a dripping wall of machinery. It didn't move, but it vibrated, like it was breathing. And then it whispered in 100 voices, "Stay." I couldn't even run this time. My legs were locked in place. I stared at it, and in its many fused speaker faces, I saw reflections. All of me, but each version of me was stuck, screaming behind the glass, banging their fists, crying blood. I didn't know if I was still awake, if I had ever been awake. Then a hand grabbed my arm and yanked me back. The woman, she was behind me again. This time, her expression was angry. "You don't get to quit." She shoved me out of aisle 3 just as it blinked out of existence. We landed hard against a wall. The lights surged. 4:59 a.m. She leaned close and whispered something. I don't remember what it was. But suddenly, I was standing outside. The door to RadioShack was locked behind me. For the first time ever, I looked around. Birds chirped. A car passed. The world was normal again. But in my chest, something still hummed. A faint, mechanical buzz, like a broken radio waiting to tune in. I didn't sleep after the 4th night. I couldn't. No matter how many times I blinked, I still saw them. Those reflections of myself, stuck behind glass, screaming silently in the speaker faces of that pulsing, breathing thing inside aisle 3. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, that mechanical tumor of wires, teeth, and radios that whispered in tongues I was starting to understand. Worse than the visions was the sound. It followed me home, a faint static buzz just beneath the edge of my hearing. At first, I thought it was in my head, but when I put my ear to the wall of Aaron's basement, I heard it too, coming through the pipes. I kept checking my reflection, scared it would talk back. Sometimes it smiled when I didn't, and worst of all, my badge never came off. I tried to remove it, yanked, tore at it, burned it, cut at the metal with a knife. Nothing worked. It was a part of me now. The store had marked me, and I knew exactly what that meant. I would go back. The 5th night, my final shift. The air outside the store was wrong. It felt like walking through syrup. The street lamps around Siloam Springs flickered, and the shadows moved like they had intent. When I approached the store, there was no open sign this time. The windows were blacked out, and the chime didn't ring when I entered. Just silence, heavy and immediate, like stepping into a vacuum. The shelves were gone. Every single aisle gone. What stood in their place was a hallway, one long, dark corridor that stretched far deeper than the store should allow. Faint green light glowed from somewhere far ahead, like an emergency exit in a tunnel. I looked down. My name badge flickered once, then stayed lit. Still active, still on duty. A small card fluttered to my feet. It had the same typewritten font as before. Final rule, do not clock out until you've made your choice. I pocketed it and walked forward. The air grew colder with each step, and the static buzz returned, louder this time. The walls were lined with old tech, stacked to the ceiling like a hoarder's cathedral. Radios, VHS players, speakers, wires, motherboards, and cassette recorders, all of it buzzing with faint power. Some of the devices turned on as I passed, showing images of myself, every mistake I'd made, every lie I told, every moment of weakness I thought the world had forgotten. They hadn't. The store remembered. I reached the end of the corridor, where a desk sat under a single flickering bulb. It looked just like the one I had stood behind every night, except sitting behind it wasn't Mr. Delroy. It was me, but older, tired, worn out like an analog tape left in the sun too long. He looked up at me, eyes sunken but familiar. "You made it farther than most," he said. I swallowed hard. "What is this place?" He leaned forward. "It's not a place, it's a signal, a transmission, a story you stepped into the moment you listened." The rules, I started, were protections, but also chains, he finished for me. They kept you alive, but they also kept me in. I shook my head. Who are you? He tilted his head. I'm the version of you who stayed too long, who didn't follow the last rule. I stared at him. He reached under the desk and placed two objects on the counter, a key and a cassette tape labeled recording. You have two choices, he said. Use the key, leave. But if you do, someone else must replace you. That's how the store survives. You can't unplug it. You can't shut it down. You can only pass it forward. And the tape? I asked. You record the rest. You stay. You become the story. The voice others hear on the static, the warnings and the rules, the one who listens. And maybe one day, you help someone else survive. I looked down at the items. The key was warm. The tape was cold. Behind me, the hallway had disappeared. The store was gone. Only blackness stretched around the desk like an ocean of ink. My badge pulsed faintly. I picked up the key. But before I turned, I asked him, if I go, what happens to you? He smiled, sadly. Then I fade. You become me. In time. I walked to the exit. A single red door had appeared, humming with energy. As I stepped toward it, the lights in the ceiling flickered again. A voice echoed behind me, my voice. Do you want to forget? I froze. I turned. The older me was gone. So was the desk. Only the cassette remained, sitting in the dark, humming faintly with a soft radio buzz. I turned back to the door, and I left. That was 3 weeks ago. The store is gone now. Not boarded up. Not closed. Gone. Like it was never there. People in town don't even remember it. When I ask about the RadioShack in Siloam Springs, they look confused. There hasn't been one of those in years, they say. But I remember. And some nights, just before sleep, I hear it again. A faint crackle of static beneath the silence. And a voice, my voice, whispering through the speakers in someone else's nightmare. I am here to listen.